Okay, so welcome back everybody, on-site and online attendees. Let's begin with the second paper session of the conference. It's going to be led by Miriam Parosari Eladhari. So let's start.
Hello, everyone. Fantastic. So this second paper session of ICIDS 2024 is focused on applications and case studies. We will have 4 presentations, which will be 20 minutes each, with including 5 minutes for questions. And for the speakers, I will be showing you notes so that we ensure to keep the time so we have ample time for questions. I would like to welcome to the stage Ian Gonzalez and Josh Fisher. Ian, where is Ian? Here is Ian. Welcome, Ian. He will speak on overlapping expectations, studying the genre relationship of open world and eco-critical genres.
Project, absolutely.
Take it away.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, wow, that's really loud. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian Gonzalez again, and I co-authored this paper with Joshua Fisher. This is a study about genres and their uses in game studies and IDN spaces. So just for a quick preview of where this presentation is going, first we'll be looking at how the definition of genre has shifted towards a social action model, and how genres are not taxonomical lists, but rather negotiated through social spaces and market interactions. And then we'll look at how this is usable in application within academia. So first, I'd like to start with this quote by Dominic Arsenault, which the great genre illusion, which he discusses that the concept of genre is used ubiquitously throughout our entire media diets and the ways that we consume and discuss media. However, the term genres is really unstable. It's not, it's different in various fields and different mediums. And so he says that it's a really chaotic, messy concept that really only is incoherent. And this is in part because of a feature level discussion of genre, that genres tend to focus on the affordances of each particular medium. For example, the cinema scholar Altman will discuss how film genres are really denoted as a result of narrative structure and shot composition and certain affordances of that medium, whereas game genres tend to focus on ludic elements of play. However, there's a shift in genre scholarship that's moving towards considering genres as social action. This particularly started in rhetorical genre spheres and now has shifted into media spheres. Steve Neal, which is a cinema scholar, discusses this best as a systems of expectation and hypothesis. So what he states is that audiences understand media referentially to other media experiences. And he says that genres are a kind of crystallization of that idea and notion. And the way that he substantiates this is with the discussion of the Western genre. So he discusses how the Western genre was founded by the Great Train Robbery, which at the time combined the 2 different genres of news genres and crime genres into a new aesthetic film experience. And as these experiences and features were recreated in different films, that the Western genre kind of coalesced around this specific idea. As Marilla Ryan discusses, genres are restrictions on media, right? They are conventions and rules that kind of guide the process of creation. And in this way, too, we can see that this affects mediums agnostic of any specific, affects genres agnostic of medium. So for example, we have video games and movies and comic books and TV shows that are all Westerns, that are all informed by the idea of a Western. And even though they don't exist in the same medium, they still influence each other and influence, most particularly, the audience expectations that audiences have with engaging with these mediums. And so this is a kind of diagram of how genre identity is formed through these social interactions and market interactions. So if we start at developers create new mediums using a range of expressions. And then these create media experiences, which create ranges of experiences which inform audience expectations, and through market interactions, such as purchases or critical reviews, etc., developers then understand what is most popular, what grabs audiences' attentions, and informs further work to recreate and reconcretize identity. So this bridges Arsenault's concept of the great genre illusion. This social action conception of genre allows us, one, to recognize that genres aren't just fixed ideas, that they are mutable based off of the social, cultural, and technological advancements of the time, because audiences and developers are informed by their technology and their social, cultural contexts. And also as well that it can be utilized to understand the grander social cultural contexts of media creation and bridges that genre illusion, right? It allows us to pull from cinema scholars who are also doing genre work, and pulling from from video game scholars who are doing genre work, and kind of create a more single usable notion across all of these disparate fields. And so this is why this matters. So Rune Clevenger, which is a genre and game scholar, will discuss how game scholarship in particular suffers from genre blindness, that despite genre's widespread use in video game consumption, we do not use it very frequently in academia. Hughes and Cairns will discuss this in a different way. They will discuss this through three different analytical frameworks: feature level, genre focused, and media specific. Feature level looks at individual games, while media specific obviously looks at the broader context of games. But genre focus tends to remain relatively underutilized. Just as a quick example, Josh Fisher discussed BioShock and ludonarrative dissonance. And Hawking's initial findings were actually pretty localized at a feature-level analysis of BioShock. But as media criticism and scholarship applied this to more and more different cases, it became a concept applied to the entirety of the medium. And I think that this gap presents a big problem. We're taking individual cases and stating that this is the case for the entirety of the medium because of this one isolated case. And so this is the utility of genre-focused analysis. And so this is where we're going to kind of begin talking about this case. So I'm going to be talking about the work of Candice and Ney and their discussions of Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn, for those who aren't familiar, is an open-world eco-critical game. It's a classic open world with a broad open environment that players can move through at their own pace, but it's also eco-critical. It judges the systems that are contributing to the climate crisis. And there's these two authors, Candice and Ney, who discuss some of these problems and issues at a feature level. They look at it specifically at Horizon Zero Dawn, but they do, they commit that act of connecting the granular to the grand. Candice in particular will say that games cannot really, with the current tools we have, are incapable of discussing eco-critical narratives and themes. And by looking only at Horizon Zero Dawn does she make this grand sweeping motion. And I'd like to argue that this is an argument better situated within genre, because it focuses it more on a specific arena of game studies. So that's what we're going to be looking at, is how do audience expectations of the open world and eco-critical genres overlap in video game experiences. And real briefly, the concept we'll be talking about is these two genres of open world games and eco-critical games. This list of themes was developed by Hughes and Cairns through a thematic analysis of user interviews. I won't read these to you, but I just wanted to highlight two that we'll talk about in particular later. The first one is that players are situated within scale to the world, because open worlds are about their environment in a large scale. Players have to be a physical person that exists within that space. It's not like a God game, for example, like The Sims, where you are kind of a god separated from the situation that you're set within. And then that two, that the world is connected and accessible. A lot of open worlds tend to remove barriers to access because they want players to have an open, accessible experience within the environment. We created these themes for eco-critical games based off of a literature review, focusing on the work particularly of Chang and DeBeck. I wanted to, again, I won't read these all to you, but I wanted to focus on two in particular. One is that this is a dynamic story world, that eco-critical games are systems. They're not about discrete threats. They tend to be system-level threats. We see that a lot in games like Frostpunk or Civilization 6. and that it's also a dynamic system, it's an ever-changing system, and it's one that operates off of the age of environmental limits, so one about finiteness. And so we're going to be talking about these overlapping expectations through the concept of what we call tension and cohesion, which in some ways is kind of a renegotiation of ludonarrative dissonance and harmony. But the basic idea is that if a genre's expectations, if you have two genres and they have two different sets of expectations, the rules and conventions, if they work together collaboratively to create a single narrative experience, they're cohesive. And if they are struggling against each other and create a dissonant experience, that it causes tension. And so we looked at this across 3 different themes. The first theme we looked at was challenges, and we did this through the kind of 2 themes of situated and abstract. So I discussed in the open world games, villains tend to always be, or threats tend to always be discrete people, or discrete objects, or discrete environments. For example, in Skyrim, it is the world-ending dragon Alduin, or it is in God of War, it is trying to climb this mountain, and obviously all the threats that Kratos and Atreus arrive at through there. Meanwhile, in eco-critical games, these threats tend to be more abstract. They're system-based threats. So in Civilization 6, for example, there's a global warming effect that you can combat collectively, and it's an abstract thing. It's not a physical thing that you can attack. It's not like there's a nation you can attack to end global warming, for example. It's an abstract concept. Meanwhile, in Frostpunk, it also is a similar concept where you're managing your resources. You're not trying to fight a discrete enemy. You're trying to manage your variety of resources to survive this space. The second kind of theme we looked at was resources. So in open world games, there tends to be infinite forms of resources, and we kind of we discussed this, Cheng discussed this in particular in terms of World of Warcraft, where the limits of resources tend to be illusory. But meanwhile, we focused this on open world games as well in terms of the Radiant quest systems. So if you're familiar with open world games, they tend to have recurrent and repeated quests to give you limitless content that you can access. And so there's a lack of finiteness. There are infinitely spawning arenas of content. Meanwhile, in eco-critical games, a lot of the contention of these games are managing strict, finite resources. In Civilization 6, the amount of resource tiles that are available to you are always limited, and such is the case as well for Frostpunk. These resources that you have access to are always limited. The last theme I wanted to discuss is interconnectedness. So this is a reason why eco-critical and open world games might tend to be connected, because they're both interested in an interconnected world in space. Obviously, in an open world games, they tend to be very accessible and open and available to everyone. Meanwhile, again, eco-critical spaces tend to focus on the connection of the environment and people in a dynamic system. And so they show an interconnected environment. And there's a desire to kind of use open worlds to discuss eco-critical issues. So what this work does is elevates Condis and Ney's points, right? That to a certain degree, yes, eco-critical and open world games do have this tension, but it's not localized only to Horizon Zero Dawn. There were 2 other cases that we looked at, which was Death Stranding and Biomutant, who are also open world and eco-critical games, and they face similar struggles. So in the case of Biomutant, despite that it's a very eco-critical and ecologically motivated game, it is also uses these kind of monstrous beasts to describe and imitate ecological disaster. Death Stranding has a similar way where it's embodied in an eco-terrorist, and not really like an abstract concept. And also that these games are also too motivated by infinite resources. And so in these ways, it also stunts the eco-critical messaging of these 2 games in a similar way that Horizon Zero Dawn does. Lastly, I just wanted to, I think with the last bits of my time, I wanted to briefly discuss why this is useful. There's not a lot of genre work currently looking at the social cultural context of genre in terms of academia. It's a really underutilized framework. And so I don't think that this is an entirely capsulating work, but I think that it's important as a starting point, as a discussion point, to show that it is useful for academic purposes, that genre can be used as a tool. It's just to say that feature level and genre focused and media specific are just tools in our tool set, and that we can use them in a variety of ways depending on our research questions and our interests and our intent. So that's my brief presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. This works better, right? Really interesting work, and I fully agree with this being something very important to address, and it's really underutilized. I want to see if we have questions from the audience who are on site. Yes?
Sorry, to hear more.
So I put it closer to my mouth.
Yeah, closer.
Okay. Do we have questions here on site? Do we have questions online? No? Can see them. Here is a question from Lisa.
So hello. I feel very powerful now. Okay, so I was powerful. I have a question just about your, and I don't mean this to be contentious at all, but when you say that genre is an what did you say, an underexplored or is underutilized in academia? That seems like a really broad claim to me, and I'm just wondering if you actually mean something narrower than that, or why. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your sense of what genre is.
So I guess what I mean is there are lots of studies that say discuss genre as a concept, discuss genre in as a broader discussion, but there's not a lot of, at least from the research that I conducted, there was not a lot of research that said, this is how first-person shooters are affected by global crises, or this is how the eco-critical genre is. Eco-critical genre is probably the one case where I see the most use of genre as an analytical framework. The work of Chang, obviously, and DeBeck have been really informative there, but there are very few studies that I saw that utilize genre as a framework of discussion. They tended to focus on individual games as opposed to games centered around a specific aesthetic experience.
Okay, so I think you helped clarify something. So, but you really mean genre within academic game studies?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because that's what I sense too. That I think I agree with you that the sense of what genre is definitely underexplored. But I think there's a lot of work, obviously in other media, media influences that can help us think more deeply about that. I think for sure the problem with genre in games, maybe as opposed to other media now, is that genre is also tied to the market, tied to money so strongly that it makes it. To me, that's a huge issue.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. And thank you for clarifying that. Yes, it is localized. It is an expansion of Rune Cleverger's work in that way, right? It's localized towards games. Obviously, there are works in, say, cinema or literature that focus on it. It's just relatively underutilized, especially for how young this space is right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that helps clarify. Thank you.
Oh, you missed him. Oh, him.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm wondering, I'm kind of close to this discussion about climate change and education, especially for children, through some work my wife does. But I'm wondering if this framework could be used for that same purpose, to educate people about the importance, one, of ecological environment, the impact it has on resources and whatnot, or if you think, let's say, educational games for this purpose can learn also from first-person shooters, maybe not by shooting people, but by using some of these mechanics and whatnot. So I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something that I'll kind of rely on Candice on, because she makes the same argument, right? It's not that, and that's why I wanted to kind of qualify Candice's statement, right? It's not that games don't have tools to discuss eco-critical issues. It's that there are better genre pairings that are better for discussing ecological issues. So Candice, for example, says that mystery games or puzzle games are probably better because they tend to be more abstract and more about collecting, using finite resources in creative ways. So yeah.
So we have time for one more question, not more.
So I think you had a slide that I found very interesting, where we saw sort of different levels of genre, right? So do you think it would be productive to identify, okay, this is a genre notion on a particular level, and when, because I mean, that was always something that bugged me, right? So people said, oh, Red Dead Redemption, that's a Western genre, but it's also an open world RPG, which is another genre, and that's something that always bugged me, that a genre was used on these different levels, and I think what you showed here is some sort of a taxonomy that I think could be very useful in dealing with the problem that I'm just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, yes, because Clearwater and, oh gosh, I'm forgetting right now. I think it might be Arsenal. Talk about that same issue, right? That because game, this goes back to the ludonarrative discussion, right? Because there are so many different different ways of telling narratives in games, that these different methods kind of create stratified levels of genre. Absolutely. I think that I tend to rely on Clearwater in this case, where he says that that we tend to focus on a singular unified experience as opposed to trying to divide them into these different categories. But of course, as you stated, we can always divide them, right? We can have, as we've seen here, we can have an open world that's Western, an open world that's sci-fi, an open world that's horror, and so there's a difficulty there. And so I know that there's work too by, I think it's Wolf, trying to create more meaningful genres that kind of create more holistic experiences. But there's lots of work in there, thankfully, that look at genre that way.
Okay, thank you.
Another big hand to Ian. Thank you. So our next speakers are Daniel Echeverry and Huachin Wei. Welcome to the stage. We will be hearing a presentation of the paper Constructing a Multiplayer Tangible Narrative with Interactive Puppets, New User Experiences and Design Challenges. So whenever you are ready, I will give you this mic.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So you're going to be changing slides? Yeah. Because I also have my notes here, so. Yeah, I can stay here. Good. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. My name is Daniel Echeverry. I'm presenting also on behalf of Huachin Wei. I'm from Massachusetts University. She's from the Hong Kong Polytechnic. And this is kind of an extension of a paper we presented 2 years ago back in Santa Cruz. I was presenting the non-myth of the noble red, which was kind of looking a little bit on Brecht and how we can use that for authoring tangible narratives. Now we have some findings that we would like to share with you. A couple of things that we want to consider first about puppets. Oh, sorry, yeah. They've been everywhere since pretty much the beginning of time. And there's one thing that's really interesting about puppetry and the puppeteer itself is the cognitive empathy, right? How do I get to communicate a lot of emotions through the movement of my character? How do I get into this same thought process of what I'm trying to represent? Next. It also provides agency to the puppeteer, right? It's a very expressive agency, also because it allows them to influence in certain way the evolution of the narrative. And so there's this really interesting concept presented 20-something years back, which is double vision. And what double vision says in certain ways that we agree two things. We agree this puppet that we're looking at, it's fake, right? It's being manipulated by someone else, but we also agree that we kind of play along with it, right? So we have fun with that and we become immersed in this. And so in certain way, this double vision concept bridges the reality of our reality and the reality of the story that we're going to be narrating. Beyond beyond entertainment, puppetry has also been used, for instance, for education and for healthcare. There are cases in which puppets are used for kids in therapy to find ways of kind of communicating better with their therapist, or to understand, for instance, medical procedures, or puppetry used in schools to teach about, relationships and learn about empathy and whatnot. Our case in particular, for us working, let's say, closer to the HCI field, puppetry has inspired controllers or ways of controllers, in many cases, VR characters, or at least putting like little plays onto screen-based systems. Their use, of course, for interactive storytelling in a certain way, but in many cases, these systems are just means of interacting with or through a screen. The difference, which is what I'm going to talk today, is that tangible narratives, they actually look at the physical world from the perspective of how the story is told, how the story is embodied, and how people interact with the story itself. There are a couple of things that we want to consider here. Is that the first one, technology in a certain way allows the construction of the narrative. That's one thing. The second thing is that there are manifestations, physical manifestations of the plot, of characters, of things that happen. So in a certain way, the screen is pretty much relegated, and the real, actual physical world takes on the stage. There are some cases that are relevant. Probably Tannenbaum's The Reading Globe is one of the early cases where you had this globe where you could take objects, and through those objects you would unfold little parts of a story. More recently, there's Shiva's Rangoli, which through the spinning of these discs, you will create different light ambiances, and then the story will shift as well. Letters to Jose, which is a little bit more recent, where you had this pop-up book-inspired narrative that you could interact with, not only by playing with a puppet, but also by touching letters or by manipulating little paper mechanisms. And more recently, the Together Alone experience, which kind of bridges not only the physical world, but people connected in different physical spaces through online video chat. So the thing that connects this experience, of course, is how do you interact physically with the story and how those objects are relevant in a certain way. And so many of these cases that we've seen, they do take a look at puppetry, but there's a big gap in how specifically puppets can have a more relevant impact on the narrative itself, but also kind of looking at multiplayer modes in the sense of what happens if groups of people start to interact through puppets, for instance. And in that sense, double vision becomes kind of a four-time vision, because I agree that I'm looking at you performing, but you also agree that you're looking at me performing. So both of us are either, both spectators and puppeteers. And so I want to show you a very quick clip. It's about 2 minutes of the non-myth of the noble red, which is the case that we're going to be talking about here. Apologies of the audio, I had to speed it up twice. So music might sound a little bit odd, but hopefully this will give you a better idea of how this thing works and what I'm going to be telling you about. I hope we have audio. Let's see. This one's the video here. Yeah. The video should have some music, but it's fine. I think you can also see that way. And so we have 3 interactive puppets. Yes. Those interactive puppets interact in a physical world, and the story kind of unfolds that way. What sets it apart is that we have 3 characters. There's the hero, the villain, and what could be the maiden. And they kind of move around this physical world. And they move through color depending on choices made by the players. Some characters can assume different roles, but everything happens in parallel, right? And so there are moments in which the players are in their own part of the story. There are moments in which the players construct their story together. And makes use of this wireless system in which the gestures I do with the puppet kind of translate into things that happen in the story, either through break dancing battle, by walking through a village and whatnot. The whole story is told through audio, so users kind of connect with their phone, but they forget about the screen. They simply hear the story unfolding. And in some cases, characters can even change and evolve if they get some sort of power up, right? If they change their personality, so they can shift in several ways. Players can also make choices, green and purple, meaning going to the house or not, yes or no, A or B. So there's a sense of agency, of course, that we provide to all of the players. We have also some NPCs that are important to the unfolding of the narrative itself. And of course, kind of taking advantage of the material aspects of the experience in certain way to blur the technological part of it and kind of keep the players connected into the story. And so we wanted to see, so we wanted to see what's the impact of this. How do people feel about playing with the non-myth? And so we conducted a story with 6 participants. Next, please. We had 3 groups of friends and 3 groups of strangers, because we also wanted to see what were the social dynamics there in that sense, not only because we're playing together, but because we know each other or not, and that can have an impact on the experience itself. And so we conducted a series of interviews after the experience, trying to understand the subjective perspective, right? Not trying to generalize everyone's, but trying to look at those tasty details of playing with the non-myth of the novel read. We are going to focus on 3 things. So the first thing that we're going to talk about quickly is player agency. We're going to talk about what are those cognitive processes behind it. And we kind of identified 2 affordances in the way they were engaging with the narrative. One, looking at the social dynamics, of course. And the second one, how do puppets in certain ways shape the experience of connecting with the narrative. I'm going to be showing you some of the highlights, some of the comments they presented, and then I'll go over them really quick. How are we on time? Good, we're pretty good. So we're going to start looking first at the how do they engage their cognitive processes and player agency. The first one, of course, is that there's kind of the discovery of cause effect. Things that I do mean things for my character, but also for others. And as they get more absorbed, more connected, more immersed into the narrative, they kind of shift from worrying about the technology. Am I doing this right? Am I touching this correctly? Is the light really working? And now they kind of start becoming more connected to the narrative itself. What's my character going to do? What decision do I want to do for my character? The next thing, of course, you are going to be listening to something, you're looking at light, you're performing to your puppet, you are looking at other people. So there's, of course, this point of cognitive overload. And that's kind of the big challenge at this point, is how do you keep it balanced? How do you keep it balanced in the sense that you can perform, but also you can look at the unfolding of the story itself. Of course, there's this shift in terms of agency, and that depends a lot on the players themselves. Some of them felt they needed more agency. I want to do a lot more stuff. I just want to move around. I want to touch everything. I want to try everything. Others kind of stuck more into, I have a set of options and I simply just play along with them, right? I want to move my character here because the system asks me to move that character there. Now, if we look at the social dynamics part, there are a couple of things, of course. Playing with friends, playing with strangers, it's about comfort, right? I feel more comfortable to be stupid when I'm with friends because I can make mistakes. I can try things that maybe not going to work. There's like, of course, a stronger sense of comfort. But also, we found some implicit agreements in the sense like, oh, this is her space. This is my space. If the story allows me to, I will go to her space at the right time. But they always agreed on that. We never said, okay, this is what you can do and cannot do. But these explicit agreements kind of became very important very soon into the experience itself. The music, of course, being able to share something together was extremely important for them. The embodied aspect of it was part of the bonding experience of playing with the non-myth. And it also happens that they can find frustration. You know, there's a moment in which one of the characters has to be kicked out, literally out of the experience. And so when I'm kicked out and I just have to look at someone, then how do I feel? I feel I'm not part of it. I feel depressed. I feel sad. Then if we look at the puppets, and I'll try to move this forward really quick, the first thing, of course, we want to see is puppets facilitate this collaborative performance. Collaborative in the sense that we're dancing together, or we're moving together, we're discovering together parts of the story. And so, again, there's kind of this sense of collective actions that we build together something in the narrative.
The next thing is, of course, because they're puppets, they augment this sense of role-playing. So people start to perform by themselves. See, my character is bad. Maybe I start hitting my character. I start hitting someone else with my character because it's bad, right? And so there's kind of that shared idea of embodied role-playing. For instance, changing the shape of my character, how that reflects into my experience. But I think for me, the most fascinating thing is that they all agree to enact this story. So physically, my puppet cannot move through the door, and that affects my performance, or it affects their performance. So either I fly out of it, or do I go outside of the door, or whatnot. So in this sense, that's kind of what they were trying to say. They cannot go through the arch of the door. I want to fly, I want to walk, because that's what my character is doing. For instance, moving from one color to the other. Yeah. And so what's the thing with this project? Of course, collaborative performance becomes extremely important in the sense that I perform for myself, I perform for others, and I become a spectator for everyone's performance. We can say that the idea of the double vision concept was confirmed in this type of experiences, in the sense that they agree that they are performing, but they're also playing with something that is fake, and it's just technology. The sense of presence, of course, catalyzed by the puppets. I am inside this physical wooden village. And again, looking at the double vision, controlling the gameplay, but also looking at the story unfold itself. So audience and puppeteers. Our work, of course, looking at the puppets, in this sense, we want puppets that are more integrated instead of mapped. Integrated in the sense that what I do with my puppet actually has a meaning both in the story of my experience and also in the real world that we get to live, kind of separating itself from more traditional screen-based experiences. So that's what we have for you today. We kind of have the next step on Thursday, so if you can join us Thursday morning, you'll see what we're doing next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for this interesting speech. How are we doing on question here on site? How is it online? Oh, yes, I see Lady Lisa sitting over there.
Thank you. I really love this work. I think it's so interesting and comes into so many different multidisciplinary capacities. It's really fun. I'm just curious about the puppets in terms of their representation to some extent. So one would be, like, do they always have a slightly humanoid appearance, or do you deal with things that are abstract, like, do you have like clouds or trees? Like, are the things that you manipulate always sort of people characters, or are they other things?
Yes, if you go to, well, one thing, it's more looking at the abstraction of how much can you abstract from the story. It's audio-based, so we had some, soundscape, for instance, of wind and water, but you don't see it, but you kind of agree that's there. Kind of going a little bit far from what I presented today, like, for instance, looking at Brecht as a source of inspiration from the puppets, where you kind of hint at stuff, but you don't really represent everything. That's one of the excuses behind the puppets being black in most cases and kind of humanoidish-like things. But we keep specific characteristics, like, say, the bad guy is a triangle, because triangles are kind of sharp.
Right.
And that's something that we had from our study, people mentioning that abstraction part, in where they kind of agreed that sharp element is villainous, or that the round shape is more heroic in certain way. So it's more how much can you give them through the abstraction, but how much can we agree that the abstraction represents something that's relevant to the
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, as you say, those boundaries of how abstract. I would be curious to know more about that. But just one, does it matter if, like, do you deal with big differentials in size in terms of, are they all relatively hand?
They're as big as your hand, right?
Okay.
So with these two fingers, you kind of work with the legs. They're 20 centimeters height or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice. Thanks. Thank you. It's all right. Yeah.
I was curious about something, if I may. So you said that some players experienced a bit of cognitive overload.
Mm-hmm.
So how much time did they have to learn to use the system?
Yes. So for the study, we did about a 10-minute tutorial where we kind of show them what were the gestures, how do you interact with objects and whatnot. And then the whole story was about 25 minutes or so. Of course, at the beginning, there's always like a little bit more slow on how they act while they get used to. But I think the learning curve was pretty quick in the sense that everything is embodied. So whatever you do with your hand at the end has a meaning to it. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, total 10-minute tutorial and then 25 or so with the actual story. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Oh, we have one.
Yeah.
Hi. I mean, I'm just trying to find the paper, but I'll find it later. But there was a work based on the therapist Heider and Simmel. Are you aware of them?
No, not familiar. I don't think.
Okay, so that's an animation that was made in the 1940s, and it just shows some shapes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And some and they're perceived as representing characters and aggressive and everything, which goes very much in line with what you're talking about. And somebody made an sort of an interactive narrative generator for kids that was presented at ICIDS in 2016. So that might be something interesting for you to look at.
I'll definitely.
It reinforces some of the things that you're saying.
Yes, just getting a little bit off, but a lot of the inspiration aesthetically comes from Kandinsky, triangle, circle, square, blue, yellow, yellow, red. So probably that.
So that would be sort of even in the period, kind of.
Definitely.
Okay, I'll search it for you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Daniel, thank you so much. So our next paper is by Brianne Pitt, Christian Roth, and Rahim Bender Salazar. But I somehow get the idea that you're Brianne, that you're going to present, right? Yes. Yes, it kind of feels like that. So I look forward to it. The title is Systems Thinking and Mapping as a Conduit for Stakeholders to Interpret Complex Reality for the Creation of a Learning Idea. Take it away.
It's a long title. Hi, everybody. Let's see. Yep, there we go. So this is a presentation about a workshop that was conducted back in Murcia in around May. And it's also part of a series of a larger body of work, including other workshops and research and initiatives, and some of which I'll actually talk about at the end of this presentation as well. So first, introductions. Christian Roth is the lead author on this paper, and he is joining us online today. I know he's online. I saw him there earlier. Hi, Christian. He's a researcher and educator in the field of interactive digital narratives and meaningful experience design at the University of Arts in Utrecht. And his work focuses on education, creativity, and co-creation. Next, we have myself. That's me. I'm a PhD candidate at Trinity College Dublin under Mads Haar, and I also am a former teacher of 10 years. And I'm currently also in my second year as a research fellow at the World Economic Forum. And last we have Rahim Bender Salazar. He is now with the University of Galway, and he's an entrepreneur, social psychologist, and an academic who focuses on the application of design, research, and creativity on innovation, business, and policy, with an emphasis on circular economy and behavioral change and entrepreneurship. And I'm going to begin with some background information on what... Hi, Christian. What's up? Well, don't really know what happened there, but it's good to see you there. Hi.
Let's continue. Let's continue.
All right. Well, I guess as I wait for the screen to come back up... there we go. I'm going to begin with some background information on systems thinking and systems mapping, highlighting their relevance to our work with INCOR and Arden, and also to contextualize the workshop that we did. But first, I'm going to start with a story, because this is a conference on storytelling. So for me, it kind of makes sense to tell a story as opposed to just throw this graphic at you and say, interpret it. So here it goes. Long ago, 6 blind men in an Indian village were captivated by travelers' tales, especially those about elephants. The men argued endlessly about what elephants would truly be like. An elephant must be powerful, said the first man. I've heard that they can clear forests. No, 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 said the second man. If the Raja's daughter rides one, it must be graceful and gentle. The third man disagreed. No. Elephants are dangerous, with terrible horns that can pierce a man's heart. Please, said the fourth man, an elephant is nothing more than a very large cow. Well, I believe elephants are magical, declared the fifth man. That would explain why the Raja's daughter can travel safely throughout the kingdom. You're all fools, scoffed the sixth man. Elephants don't exist at all. They're just a joke people tell to amuse themselves. So tired of their arguments, the villagers sent the blind men to the Raja's palace to encounter an elephant. When they arrived after a very long journey, eagerly, each man was brought to the elephant to touch a different part. The first man touched the elephant's side. An elephant is smooth and solid like a wall, he declared. It must be very powerful. The second man felt the elephant's trunk. He declared, it must be like a giant snake. And the third man touched the elephant's tusk. I was right, he decided. This creature is as sharp and deadly as a spear. The fourth man felt the elephant's leg. An elephant is clearly like a sturdy cow, he said. The fifth man touched the elephant's ear. It's like a fan, he said. Maybe even a magic carpet that flies over mountains. And finally, the sixth man tugged the elephant's tail. You're all wrong, he said with a laugh. This is nothing but a piece of rope. So the man sat under the tree, continuing their debate about what the elephant was. Wall, snake, spear, cow, magic carpet, rope. Stop shouting, called the Raja, awakened from his nap by the noisy argument. How can each of you be so certain that you're right? Asked the ruler. The elephant is a large animal. Each of you touched only one part. Perhaps if you put the parts together, you will see the truth. Now, let me finish my nap in peace. After a minute of thinking, he's right, said the first man. To learn the truth, we must put all the parts together. Let's discuss this on our journey home. And as they journeyed home, they eagerly shared their thoughts. Together, they had discovered the value of seeing the world through many perspectives. So as we see from this story, there can be multiple truths to every experience. There could be multiple perspectives to every story. And there's also many solutions to one problem. And the world is full of many elephants, or rather, complex, wicked problems. So the wicked problems of our global society underscore the need for systems thinking. And in the 20th century, we saw a significant rise in complexity arising generally from the Industrial Revolution and the advent of the internet. As you can see here, traditional thinking methods, though, are still really prevalent. However, we need systems thinking, which kind of resembles more of that wicked problem that you saw before. Also, media bias and misinformation, information quality and processing shape our mental models of the world. So as you can see here, here's an image of a mental model. A mental model kind of acts as a lens in which we see the world. So when we think about the structures, cognitions, and coding, about the information, the data, the content, and the details, we get an image of what this real world is. But this is only our interpretation, and we iterate upon it as we practice interacting with that real world. However, the problem is information quality and processing of those mental models of the world right now are not accurate. Basically, the quality and nature of the information that we receive, along with the processing methods, significantly affect our ability to construct accurate mental models of this real world. And then also, we have things like social platforms that basically, these social platforms kind of end up pushing on are pushing upon us confirmation bias, I guess you could say. They're built to keep people online, which means feeding people information like through algorithmic recommendations. And this often results in what we call confirmation bias, which is eventually landing people in alternate realities. So sometimes when we think we really understand a topic very well, we have to take a step back and say, well, what is the information that I've been able to access on the internet, and what is that information telling me? Because the information I access is different than other people. So oftentimes in politics in particular, and I think about, you know, the divisiveness that it exists today, we can't understand why somebody might like a certain presidential candidate and not another. But ultimately, people are living in different alternate realities, and this is why they believe in what they do, because all the information that they've been fed is all this blue information here instead of all the other information that exists out here. So this is what I call filter bubbles and confirmation bias, which is a big problem in the world now too. And lastly, outdated educational practices further emphasize this importance of adopting a systemic perspective, specifically when many are still rooted in traditional teaching methodologies and practices, like you could see here, standardized mass testing, which is just needs to stop. All right, so to navigate complexities of our interconnected world, we not only need systems thinking, but also practical tools to apply it. And one of these practical tools is causal loop diagrams. And this is the actual, this is the tool that we use during the workshop. So a causal loop diagram is a closed sequence of causes and effects that is a closed path of action and information. So as you can see here, if you have more eggs, you get more chickens. If you have more chickens, you get more eggs. However, on this side, you have another loop that is connecting to this problem, which balances it out. More chickens you have, the more road crossings you have. The more road crossings you have, the less chickens. So this is what we call a causal loop diagram. I think of creating a causal loop diagram as kind of like developing a language, a common language in which we can speak about complex systems. And I like to talk about these as causal stories. So for example, if you use variables and nouns, key elements and variables of the system like egg, chicken, right here, then you have the links, which are the verbs. This is how you describe the loop in the action verbs. So example, you have, lay, increase, decrease. So here the story is chickens lay eggs, which increase the number of chickens, and the more chickens increase, the more road crossings there are. The more road crossings are, the less chickens. So basically this creates a dynamic system where the chicken population is both supported and limited by the different factors within the environment. So what are the benefits of using causal loop diagrams for understanding systems? Well, the purpose is they represent relationships and feedback loops within a system. We have to think about the feedback loops. Nothing exists in isolation. Understanding systems also helps us visualize interactions and dynamics without focusing on a specific issue, and identifying problems. Map problematic systems, highlight feedback loops, deriving negative outcomes, and guiding potential solutions. So we believe that interactive digital narratives hold great potential as tools for understanding complex systems, but however, we sometimes lack access to high quality IDNs, and we even have a greater gap of knowledge about how to effectively design and build them. And we believe that using this kind of stakeholder mapping tool can help us build IDNs that are fair and representative of the system through different stakeholders that all participate in the mapping. Let's actually skip through this one for right now. So our work with the INCORE group, led by Christian Roth, highlighted the potential of IDNs to support multi-perspectivity through two complementary modes that you can see up here, the frog's eye view and the bird's eye view. So this aligns with that metaphor about the elephant, where the blind man and the elephant are the frog's eye view because they're all touching a different part. And that is important to have that element. But at the same time, it's also important to have a balance where we can zoom out as well to see the elephant as a whole. So our mission here is to bring these two areas together within interactive narrative design so we can create and communicate transformative tools. So why causal loop diagrams? We already talked about that actually. So the case study that we had 18 stakeholders, 18 researchers participate in this. So we had people from different walks of life all contributing to a specific topic. I think there were about 5 people per group within the topics. And no, next. You got it. All right, so this is an example of one of the causal loop diagrams that was created for cultural heritage right here. And this balances accessibility and protection of cultural heritage. So this causal loop diagram shows the challenges of making cultural heritage sites accessible while also having to protect them. And the next one is one on climate change. This group broke down the complex topic of climate change and focused on the island of Tuvalu, dealing with issues like rising sea levels, population displacement, and government support. And then we had another one that was really, really interesting, where we had a collaborative discussion that led to certain aha moments with one of the women's health group members. So basically, the initial focus was on women's health more broadly. But then as they started talking about the system and developing this language to speak about it together, they realized that the boundaries in the CELD revealed gender stereotypes as the core issue to women's health broadly. So basically, reorganization of the causal loop diagrams and the planning for IDM really helped us understand the problem at its core. All right, so takeaways just quickly. Takeaways that we had from this were there was a visual representation, help us to build better mental models, understand relationships and dynamics, and improve communication between stakeholders by building a common language to talk about this system. But we also do need to be aware about the risks. So we have to consider externalities and systemic impacts in policy design. And also, in particular, we have to be careful we don't get oversimplified solutions and conclusions, because we can potentially misguide policy making. But as I like to say, all models are wrong, but some can be useful. So weather models aren't always correct. How many times have we gotten the wrong weather report and we went outside without a rain jacket and it rains? Well, that's okay. Weather models can still be useful because sometimes they are right. All right, so basically we're better together, guys. IDNs can immerse learners into narrative topics that are complex, allowing us to explore different perspectives, which is really key here. And systems mapping can help us understand how to build these interactive digital narratives fairly. IDN is a good ingredient to this learning meal, but it also doesn't have to be everything. There's lots of other things too that need to be considered. But here's where my call to action is. And this is me reaching out to you guys here because as I said earlier, I'm working at the World Economic Forum. And I just recently built a platform, and we're looking for interactive narratives to host on the site. So basically, the platform that we've created is an open access resource platform on systems thinking education. And this platform basically has things like, one more, you got it? Yep. So lesson plans, presentations, worksheets. It has the latest trends, blogs and insights, micro-credentials, a discussion forum, a student learner showcase. But what we have here, as you can see in, right here, we have, you can teach, we'll have lesson plans, we have the read, you can read the blogs, we have the watch, you can watch videos, we have upskill, and we have showcase for student work. So if anybody has student work that is exceptional, we'd love to host on the platform. But more importantly, oops, go back, yep, you're good. Oh, go back one more. I'm gonna add that. So you can see up here, we don't have a play yet. And this is the action verb that I want to add to this site, and this is where I want our interactive digital narratives to exist. Because we really don't, as I said earlier in the program, we don't really have a place to go just to look for interactive digital narratives. They're scattered everywhere, so it'd be really great if we can host some of them on the platform here in play. So thank you very much, everybody, and I appreciate your listening.
Thank you, Brianne, for this talk. Do we have questions here in the room? Yes, we have one right up there. While he's getting the microphone, it was very nice with all these animals that you had.
Thank you for your presentation. I work here as a teacher in the journalism department. You mentioned journalists and your model that probably work and probably doesn't. I would like you to explain if you have a specific case where journalists can work and what role can they develop in making the model functional, because you mentioned too some aspects that are crucial, that are very important in the role of journalism in the communication today. So I would like you just to explain, let's say, with an example, what role can journalists do in your model?
That's a really interesting question. And actually, Christian, I might ask you when I'm answering this, can you see if you can find the journalism causal loop diagram? I don't know if you can find it online, but we actually had a group of journalists that worked on a causal loop diagram together to build an understanding of a complex topic. And I think actually, Claudia, was it your group? It was your group, yes. So Claudia, go ahead. Yes, so Claudia is actually going to be presenting next, and her group was a journalist. They were a group of journalists that built an understanding of a complex topic together. I don't know, did you find it, Christian, in time or not? It's okay if you didn't. It's a little bit of a quick last-minute ask. We have all the images in the paper, guys, so go to our paper and definitely read it. But yeah, it's important for a journalist, when a journalist is creating a piece, they have to recognize their own bias, because we all have a bias. And it's not about getting rid of our biases necessarily, but making sure that we're trying to be as fair as we can at representing a very complex topic, which means interacting with stakeholders, all the people that are involved in that problem. We need to talk to them all in order to get a more holistic understanding of what the problem is, as opposed to going out there on our own and developing the story. I used to actually teach journalism in high school. And one of the things that I did to teach kids about media bias is I all had them tell the same exact story, but I gave them each a different angle. And I would send them out and they would go take videos and they would create a documentary, a little newscast piece. And when they came back, they were shocked that they all had such different views of the same exact topic. So for me, that was really influential to see, oh wow, having kids build these interactive digital narratives or these videos or these newscasts help them recognize how easily bias can be embedded in our media and how to recognize it themselves because they were partaking in the process of building it. I hope that answered your question. Do you have anything to say, Christian?
I wonder how well the connection goes. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, very well.
So something to add next to the journalist is that we use these causal loop diagrams a lot during design. So what we did in the workshop, we also do in classes for narrative designers to help them tackle a complex project and to see, okay, what kind of nodes do we want to focus on? What are the verbs of our story? And how to make this as a group effort. So it helps to find out what is a shared vision, what's the topic, how to tackle it, and also where to offer solutions.
Yes.
So it's a very nice tool for many applications.
Anyone else? Yeah. Go ahead. I can scream and By the way, these presentations before mine were so good. Those were hard acts to follow up, especially yours.
I'm afraid this will have to be the last question.
So with the causal loop diagrams, does it infer the arrows? Do they infer that systems are in equilibrium or that forces are equal? Is there any way to show differences in the strength of different causes?
So the way in which you can show differences in strengths of the causes is actually the next step from causal loop diagramming, which goes from systems thinking to systems dynamics. So that's when you can actually build what we call stock and flows, which are the next step. And once you build the causal loop diagram, you can start thinking about, okay, how much is this impacting this? And this is when you start to put the quantities in there. And then you use a simulation experience, so some kind of computer program that can actually simulate what this is, and that's what systems dynamics and stock and flow systems are. So that would be like the next step. This is really just the preliminary step to get people talking about the system. And no, systems are hardly ever balanced. So again, that's where the stock and flows would come in. Good question, though.
Thank you so much, both Brian and Christian here. And also extra props to the program chairs for the sequence of putting the papers, because now we're going to hear Claudia Silva talking about the a concept very similar here. So co-authors are also Rocio Zamora Medina and Andrius Suminas. And the title for the talk here is Experience, Don't Tell, Integration of IDN into Journalistic Practices.
Hello, everyone. I actually want to start with an invitation. I want to resort to your imagination. So imagine this. It's the middle of the night, and you just have been told that you have to leave your house immediately. And here is the question. What would you take with you? What things, what objects, maybe not objects, something that is relevant to you? So now let me take you back to the years of 2014 and 2018, when countless Syrian refugees needed to do this, to reach Europe and leave a zone, like a war zone. So today, I'm going to share with you this paper, which is about introducing IDN principles into journalism. In this section here, we have heard presentations about games, education, complexity in terms of like understanding how IDN can address complexity. And here, the question we are addressing in this paper is, what is the thing of journalistic IDNs? This is a work that we started. So I co-authored this paper with Rocio Zamora Medina from Spain and Andrius Suminas from Lithuania. It's a work that we started in the community of IndyCore, which is about applying IDN to understand societal issues, complexity, and related issues. So in this paper, we are looking specifically how news media, mainstream and independent news media, address this societal issue of the refugee crisis in Europe through journalistic reporting. So actually, this scenario that I propose to you as an initial exercise for this presentation is something that newspapers are doing. So BBC, for example, asked their audiences to do this. Like, if you had to leave your house, if you have been told, if you're forced, it's not a choice. You are forced to leave your house because you're in a war zone, what you take. And this is one example of how newspapers are using IDN principles to create journalistic IDNs. So here, as you can see, this is a Get Involved section. And as you can read here, the newspaper is proposing to the audience, well, we'd like to know what you take with you if you were forced to leave your country, and inviting the audience to use hashtags. What would you take, and Syrian journey. So this is just a small piece. This is a screenshot of a whole IDN that I will be talking in detail in this presentation. So in this paper, we have three case studies. One is by the Guardian, which is called the Refugee Challenge. It was launched in 2014, and a piece by BBC, which is called the Syrian Journey. also launched 1 year after, and the third case study created by ProPublica, which is more like sort of independent, not so mainstream type of media, which is called The Waiting Game. So now I will be talking just a little bit in details, just for you to understand. So here again, it's a screenshot of the Guardian piece. And as you can see, one of the things that we analyzed in the piece is the type of format that a journalistic IDN covers. And as you can see here, you have a photo, you have a piece, even though it is very small, of a map to help the audience to locate where the war was happening. And then you have also a little bit of text. And here is when we start getting to the journalistic IDN. As you can see here, the journalistic piece is giving the readers a choice, inviting the audience to have some sort of agency to make a decision. So here is the question. Do you decide to try to reach Europe by any means necessary, or you decide it would be safer to travel over land to the nearest country, Turkey, and seek refugee there? So you have to choose if you're doing this through Europe or if you're going to do this through Turkey. So what is interesting here to highlight in these journalistic IDNs is that everything, like all the reporting was, all the data was following journalistic standards of interviewing people, refugees going through this. So, yeah, you can move forward. Yes. So here you have another example by BBC. Syrian Journey is actually, it's very similar to the one done by The Guardian, very, very similar, even though there is the level of agency and decision making, the choices are a little bit more complex than the previous one. But as you can see here with these screenshots, also instead of just like having photos as the traditional journalism, there is illustration, the choices, and also there is the map, and it's very rich in terms of formats, media format. Here I would like to highlight in this screenshot the possibility of replaying. There are several pathways in the narrative, in the journalistic IDN, and it's interesting that BBC here is inviting the interactor to try again. And this try again, there is like a dual symbolic meaning of trying again, because it's the idea of replaying the story, but it's also the idea of trying to reach Europe. So there is this dual symbolic meaning of trying again, and the audience can also share the results on social media. Here, I would like to highlight, which I think is the most interesting aspect of a journalistic IDN, which is mixing up, in comparison, of course, to traditional journalism, mixing up first-person narratives with third-person narratives. We learn in school, if you're studying journalism or if you're back in the days, not nowadays, that you should report in the third person. Here, it's clearly a technique that BBC is applying to make the story more engaging, more immersive. So there is this example here of a refugee telling the story in the first person of being just in this truck full of chocolate, and with the other people, and how some of them, it was getting warm and oppressive, and they couldn't get out because they were trying, of course, to reach a certain destination. And it's also interesting to highlight that you can see there on the right, that besides this first person narrative with the illustrations, as you can see here, you also have videos with also refugees telling their stories in the first person, but not only like showing themselves, their faces, but also illustration. So it's, again, I'm highlighting here the idea of first-person, third-person narratives. And I should say also that the first-person narrative is intended. It's a journalistic technique here, because by the end of the reporting, in this case, BBC informs that a journalist talked to the person telling the story in the first person. So it's intended. So the third case is the waiting game, which is very, very different from the other two cases. And the idea here is being on the shoes of a refugee trying to go to the United States and waiting for receiving asylum permits. So as the name explains, self-explains, it's pretty much about understanding how draining and oppressive the idea of waiting for this can be. And it's, in terms of immersion, it's also more immersive than the other two cases. As you can see here on the first page of this IDN, there is this instruction here to the interactor to put on their headphones. And this case, in terms of journalism, is very interesting because they have 5 characters, and those characters, they were created also based on journalistic interviews with them. So it's a very, okay, thank you. So it's very interesting to see the difference of games and IDNs, because one of the questions that we have been looking at is like, is a journalistic IDN only a news game? Of course, we know there is a great body of literature about news games. But one of the questions that we're still trying to understand, this is a very exploratory paper, I have to say. It's just an initial introduction to this conversation. We don't have an answer to that yet. So here is just also illustrating the idea of being patient, and without being a spoiler for those of you who haven't played this game yet, by the end of it, you get this message, you made it 6 days, and also you can see how much time or how people are not patient, of course, to play this game. So you are confronted with this experience by the end of your interaction with the waiting game. So very quickly, the idea of this paper, as I have been explaining, we are trying to understand how can we provide a working definition of journalistic interactive digital narratives. We also analyzed those 3 cases, looking at what are the most relevant characteristics of a journalistic IDN, based specifically on some criteria provided by Janet Murray, and to get the experience of the story and better understand the refugees' stories. And as last question, we also, based on the work of Kunitz, we try to understand what type of IDN typology is relevant to be explored in the journalistic context. So I will skip this one. Why is this important? Journalism nowadays are struggling, newspapers and news outlets, to innovate. There are several trends in terms of innovating journalism. As you might know, transmedia journalism. Nowadays we have more emergent forms as immersive journalism, robot journalism. AI is changing journalism right now. And in this paper, we are providing another umbrella term, which is IDN, because I and my co-authors, we have realized that in the field of journalism, IDN is not a terminology that is used. So this paper is almost an invitation to also to the community, looking at IDNs, but also at the field of journalism, understand what IDN is as a field. So the idea here is how IDN can contribute to innovation and journalism. And how did we approach it? It's a qualitative paper. It's a qualitative method. We had funding to explore several cases and to select case studies looking at one specific societal issue. And we found that at this period of time between 2014 and 2018, newspapers, news outlets were looking at the refugee crisis. So we decided to look at that specifically to understand the potential of journalistic IDNs to address complexity. And we had 6 categories, formats, in terms of media formats, immersion, agency, transformation, the typology provided by Kunitz, and complexity representation. Results, the most interesting part, we have realized that while all 3 IDNs excel in immersion and transformation, the refugee challenge and city journey emphasize user agency, as you saw in these in screenshots, a lot of options to make decisions. And in contrast, the waiting game focuses on more being powerless. You cannot do anything, you just have to wait to get a piece of paperwork, which may increase, it's in a paradoxical way, it can be more emotionally engaging for some people, even though in our analysis, we noticed that it can also be a little bit boring and affect negatively immersion and especially agency. So replying to our research questions, the first one is, of course, it's an initial preliminary work, so it's a working definition, but what we're trying to say here in this paper is that journalistic IDNs has a potential in terms of instead of just telling a story, that's where our the paper title comes from. The idea is providing an experience when it is hard to make people aware or understand the societal issue through traditional journalistic reporting. So we have noticed this, that is the idea of experience, which has been also addressed in current journalism scholarship. It covers various media formats. Agency is also very important and strong, and also leverage participatory journalism in terms of engaging the audience and also using social media. What are the more relevant characteristics of a journalistic IDN here? We have noticed here in terms of agency, immersion, and transformation that the Syrian journey and also the refugee challenge provides a lot of multiple choices. The fact that also that the interactor can replay, whereas the waiting game has the agency is very low, and it's a static in terms of immersion. The Syrian journey and refugee challenge is emotional. It has a lot of visual aids, illustrations, sound, and whereas the waiting game has also, it can be very emotional in terms of engaging the audience. Detailed storytelling and sound is very used in the waiting game. In terms of transformation, it's the first case, the Syrian journey, is very high, whereas the refugee challenge is moderate, and the waiting game is low. Of course, here we acknowledge the subjectivity of the results. As I said, this is, in terms of research methods, is a limitation because we conducted the analysis ourselves. So I have one more, you can skip that one. Just as a final question, we also found as a relevant typology the personal experience narrative. This is common across all cases. the first-person narratives, which is not common in traditional reporting, in traditional journalism. So one of the questions that this work raised in terms of future research is the future of journalistic IDN, innovative journalistic reporting, personal, personal stories, first-person narratives are going to be eventually the future of this type of journalism. So it's an open question that I would like to bring up also for discussion. So I would love to hear from you. And as key lessons that we learned, one, again, as I just said, personal stories and first-hand accounts are extremely important. In combination, not only first person, but in combination with third person narratives in terms of traditional and innovative journalistic reporting. Ethics are essential. One of the things that, one of the questions that this work raised is agency in journalistic IDNs is about giving the interactors choices, but refugees don't have choices. So in terms of journalism, refugees see themselves in this reporting. So this is something that I would like also to explore in future research. And also relating it to the scholarship of IDN, interdisciplinarity drives innovation. I didn't have time to talk about it here, but it's in the paper. Most of these IDNs, journalistic IDNs, are curated by interdisciplinary teams in media labs within news outlets. So this is something also to unpack as a research. And to finalize my presentation, this is just initial work in this paper, documented in this paper. Me and my co-authors, we are going to, actually we have done this work already, showing those cases, those use cases to journalism students first year, and trying to understand how they perceive the potential of these journalistic IDNs in terms of journalistic experience. So we have done a study actually in Spain, and then we will be doing another one in Lithuania soon to complete the work. So this is my presentation. Gracias, thank you very much for your attention. And I'm looking forward to the questions.
Questions in the room? We don't have time for more than perhaps 2 or 3 since we're running into the coffee break now. Serge?
Yeah, thank you so much, Claudia. When I present a Syrian journey, the writing game, or another piece, which is Bury Me My Love. I don't know if you know Bury Me My Love.
Yes.
It's about a Syrian woman, and you play the role of the husband. Some of my students, not the majority, but they said that it's not possible to play the role of a Syrian migrant comfortably seated in front of a computer or a smartphone, and that the only thing that you can do is to help the migrants in the physical world. And so I'm very happy that you raised, the ethical issues at the end. And so what would you answer them?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. It's also a very important concern, and it's also some sort of like skepticism regarding journalistic IDNs. Because the potential of journalistic IDNs, as we can see, and especially looking at the work we are doing within Indicor, our network, trying to understand how IDNs can address societal issues, is the ethical concern of actually this idea of providing empathy, which is tricky, because again, if a person doesn't have an idea, which we don't, if we're not in a war zone, what that means, it's just, it can be empty. So I actually don't have an answer yet to see how actually people react to these cases, like the Syrian journey. The Syrian journey was actually criticized at the time it was released by BBC. But I think that's why it's important that we show those cases because they are not well known. Like I have been talking to people, even to students, they are not aware of this journalistic IDNs, and also because they are kind of like projects, right? They, like BBC is not doing this all the time, also because it's expensive. So I think it's really important also to run more studies with users, with readers, audiences, audience studies to understand the impact of it. And one thing also, just to complement my answer, I think it's really important to use participatory design methods to build this type of journalistic IDNs, which I don't think none of like BBC, The Guardian, and ProPublica did here. They did reporting. They sent out reporters to those areas and they did their journalistic work. They interviewed several refugees, but in terms of building up like the interface and the IDN itself, they didn't include the participants, the interviewees.
Right, thank you for this great talk. One thing I was wondering, how would you compare it to sort of a work on a very similar subject, like The Breathtaking Journey by this team in Amsterdam, which is about the same topic, you know, Syrian refugees coming into Europe, but it's not done by journalists. Where would you see the differences?
Okay, yeah, that could be interesting to compare. But out of my mind, just without thinking so much, I think the difference between journalistic one and non-journalistic one is, first of all, where do you get the data? And the values and journalistic standards of like conducting an interview and how do you treat the data, which is different from what we do as researchers. So I think that would be the difference. I think for me, the most striking thing here in this analysis was this combination of first-person narratives and third-person narratives, even though the work was done by the journalists. Like even if the narrative was told in the first person, there is a disclaimer at the end of the narrative that the work was done by two journalists. So I think that would be the difference in terms of journalistic standards and somebody doing something without necessarily. Maybe they do, but I would say that would be my guess. But I think it's a great idea also for a research study to compare them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful, Tavia. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes this session. We have a break now, and the next session starts at 4:30 sharp, so that's in 24 minutes.
Hello, everybody. We are about to begin, so if you could take your seat.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. One thing I also want to remind everybody about, we will have Best Paper Awards at the end, and we will be voting for that. So, I mean, also for this reason, it's very important to pay attention, and, you know, if you like something in particular, maybe, you know, make a quick note somewhere that you want to vote for that paper and presentation maybe later on, and this voting will take place on Friday, as will be the awards ceremony. And, you know, there's a real award here associated. It's not only like, you know, a nice piece of paper that you will get to hang on your wall, but there is actually a monetary award sponsored by our publisher Springer. Just to make everybody aware of that. And of course, the voting will start happening after the final presentation, so everybody gets a fair chance to have presented their work. And there will be several categories, as you will learn about later. There will be, I think, a best student paper, a best long paper, and a best short paper award. Thank you.
Hello again. So we will be starting the late breaking work session right now. It's going to be an intensive one. We have 11 presentations. 11. And the first 3 are online, and also they are in Europe, so it's quite late over there. So we're going to start with them. And yeah, the first 2 are videos, and the third one, the person is going to do it online. And then we're going to have blocks of 4 presenters, and we'll go like that. So I want to ask you, if you are going to present in this session, if you are sitting back there, I'm going to do, you know, like just professors, get closer to here, because since this is going to be very intensive, so I'm going to ask you, please, yes, thank you, to get closer to the stage. So it's going to be easier to move towards the stage. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, so the presentations, each presentation, each presenter has 5 minutes to present. So please be concise. And I will keep track of time. And also, Maria, the Q&A, we will have each presentation, and then 5. Okay, so we are not going to have the questions after each presentation, but a block of 4. Okay, all right. I think we can start with the first 2, which are videos. The first one we're going to watch is the subliminal teaching for elderly people through cross-media storytelling.
Welcome to our cross-media storytelling approach to empowering those who are particularly vulnerable to cyber threats to make use of beneficial IT services in a secure way without falling victim to cyber criminals and without fear of that happening. In an initial user study, we have found that among elderly people there is often a strong reluctance to using IT services, including teaching offers for IT security.
Hi everyone, I'm Akrivika Tifori, and on behalf of
Welcome to our cross-media storytelling approach to empowering those who are particularly vulnerable to cyber threats to make use of beneficial IT services in a secure way without falling victim to cyber criminals and without fear of that happening. In an initial user study, we have found that among elderly people there is often a strong reluctance to using IT services, including teaching offers for IT security. So we chose an approach of cross-media edutainment through digital and analog storytelling material that can be consumed just for entertainment, but contains integrated useful information together with an encouraging message. Expecting a high degree of heterogeneity within our target group in terms of advanced knowledge and preference for certain narrative genres, which has been confirmed in a first user study, we are aiming at personalization by presenting a choice of various story genres and a configurable interface for access to an open internet platform which is currently being filled by a multitude of content entries varying by genre, media, language, and several other parameters. Last year at ICIDS, we presented our concept to develop a first demonstrator for the cross-media storytelling approach with the topic of password security and the main target group of elderly people for a first test. Now we can present the results of this test with the implementation of a generic narrative structure in 2 genres and a variety of media, both analog and digital. Based on a generic storyline, we have produced a crime story and a science fiction story that were both presented in live reading events at an elder's residence and at a city fair, partially accompanied by musical interludes. We also distributed printed booklets of both stories and audiobook versions that are available on CD and online on our hypermedia novel platform where all material from the project is gathered. Information about how passwords can typically be cracked and about procedures to generate secure but also memorable passwords was exemplarily integrated in 2 different stories that shared a common underlying structure. The Stick of Death tells a story of a young newspaper carrier who discovers a murder victim holding an encrypted USB stick. Together with his granny, an IT expert, he manages to first decrypt and then re-encrypt the data on the stick, and also to help the police in solving the murder case. Life on Mars collects official and personal logs and communications from a pioneering mission to colonize the Red Planet, where the first human settler needs access to a Martian habitat previously built by a robot mission and secured by an unknown password. She gets help from the mission AI, while a competing team is underway to usurp the station. An initial survey with overall 23 participants seems to confirm our assumption that by reception of the stories, information about password security was learned and awareness raised, sometimes even without at first noticing a knowledge gain. In the digital domain, the now over 20 years old but still valid concept of hypermedia novels is undergoing rework to fit up-to-date hypermedia technology and the special requirements of our target groups for personalization, and also introduce more interactive components like annotating, editing, and extending the existing stories as well as adding new ones. We are currently also evaluating AI tools like ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, or DALL-E for their potential to support the large-scale implementation of generic story structures, and have discovered some abilities of the large language models related to the translation of narrative text into multiple languages that are as impressive as they are surprising. But that is another story. Or send me an email.
Presentation and okay, equal. So let's watch the next one, which is titled Collaborative Interactive Digital Narrative.
Hi everyone.
Okay.
I'm Akrivika Tifori, and on behalf of my co-authors, I'd like to share with you our preliminary findings about collaborative IDN creation as a learning tool in higher education. This study took place in the context of the InterArt project, which explored storytelling and art as means for people to feel more connected and empathetic. One of its case studies were stories aimed to help the user understand and connect with the experiences of others during the COVID-19 pandemic. It has already been established that IDN offers a dynamic and engaging way to learn as it combines storytelling with agency through interactive elements. In this study, we focus on the creativity aspect of IDN, examining the potential of collaborative offering for the students to develop a deeper understanding and a wider perspective of a topic, as well as promote creativity, critical thinking, and social skills. So we organized the study with 64 university students who self-organized in 22 groups. The students were given 2 months to create an IDN about the pandemic using the NaraLive StoryMaker tool. The students were trained in the use of the tool and given tutorials and support when needed. We then conducted an analysis of the created IDNs, exploring how students approached IDN creation, focusing on narrative techniques, media elements, and themes. Our analysis revealed a variety of approaches to IDN creation. Some opted for linear narratives, guiding viewers through a predetermined sequence of events, while others experimented with non-linear structures, incorporating branching points and agency. The use of media elements significantly enhanced the storytelling experience, allowing students to create immersive and engaging narratives. The themes explored in the IDNs were diverse, reflecting the students' interests and perspective. These included museum tours, artistic activities, education and information provision, human relations, solidarity and volunteerism, and allegory and fairy tales. In conclusion, collaborative IDN creation is indeed a promising pedagogical tool that can enhance student engagement, creativity, and critical thinking. By providing opportunities for collaboration, reflection, and the integration of real-world content, IDN creation can transform the learning experience, promoting dialogue and active participation. As a next step, we aim to delve deeper on these aspects of collaborative interactive digital narrative creation as a pedagogical tool in higher education and its impact in learning. We need to proceed with in-depth interviews with the students as well as new, more targeted studies to examine the student perspectives and the collaborative process and gain a deeper understanding of the benefits and challenges of this approach. Thank you very much.
Give a round of applause. Now we're going to have the third presentation of this block, the third and the last one, and I believe Anka is online to present. Is she? Anka, are you there? So in the meantime, I'm going to read the title, The IDN Design Model, a Proposal for Extended SPP Model. And it's authored by Anka Sebanuscu and Hartmut Konitz. Is she online? Okay, great.
Yes, I am. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you very well. You can start.
Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. And in this presentation, I will introduce a new IDN design model building on the existing SPP model with a focus on the creative design process and the role of artificial intelligence. I'm Dr. Anka Serbanescu, and I recently finished my PhD in the field of interactive digital narrative, where I studied the dynamics of human-AI co-creativity. I had the honor to collaborate and to write this paper with Dr. Konitz, who contributed critically to the reflection on the theoretical development of the SPP model. The gap we worked on is theoretical in nature. We adopt a design-centered approach into the interdisciplinary field of IDN. In the IDN area, there is a tendency to focus on how to generate an IDN product rather than focusing on the process that leads to that product. Likewise, we have limited theoretical frameworks that address the IDN creation process, especially in collaboration with AI. In addition, generative AI needs to be considered not only as an automatic static story generator, but also as a collaborative partner in the process of creating an IDN product. The SPP theoretical model developed by Koenitz over the years is to date the current model that facilitates a theoretical understanding of what an IDN is. IDN is the result of combining the system, the process, and the product. With the system category, the model refers to the digital artifacts ready to be used by the users, called interactors. The process refers to the interaction between the system and the interactor, while the product is the result of the user's interaction with the system. And instantiation refers to the connection between the computer or software and the output it generates. The novelty of the IDN design model is the consideration of the antecedent part before delving into the system. The IDN design model is structured and composed into macro categories, the IDN design process, and a narrative design output, each of which has their own subcategories. So please note that the system category in the SPP model is the bridge from one model to another. Starting from the SPP model, which you can see at the bottom of this diagram, we build the IDN design model. The IDN design model is a theoretical proposal of an extended version of the current SPP model. And the novelty of this new model is the integration of the IDN design process before delving into the dynamics of the SPP model. The IDN design process refers specifically to the collaboration between the designer and the generative AI system that ultimately aims to produce an IDN design artifact. This collaboration is a participatory process in which generative AI is an active component that supports in the production of a narrative design product. The IDN design process is an iterative and irregular process that combines creative design process, the authoring process, and the data pipeline one. The results of the participatory process is what is introduced here as a narrative design product. The narrative design product can be a traditional narrative that has no interactive and no digital component. Then we have the interactive narrative that has an interactive component but not a digital one. And finally, the IDN is an artifact that is an artifact that has all three components, and it can be considered a system in terms of SPP model. This model provides a facilitation in understanding the meaning and the components of an IDN. It shifts the focus from the IDN product to the IDN process by considering the participatory process of creating an IDN with the support of generative AI. Then AI tools such as ChatGPT can generate narrative content, making it easier for designers to create IDNs. This model enables richer storytelling experiences with interactive and dynamic narrative elements. The model works on bridging the theoretical gap by systematizing the IDN stages, by introducing new stages and terminologies such as the IDN process and the narrative design product. In addition, the model comes with a design-centered approach that considers the impact of conducting a project before delving into the output. We acknowledge the limitation of not fully addressing AI design category within the framework, but future research will focus on enhancing AI-driven techniques and providing IDN creators with a more robust framework for adaptive and interactive digital narratives. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. So now we have 5 minutes for questions. I would like to know if there is any question. All the presenters are online. And is there any question here in the room or someone online? Let's start with the room. Anyone? Okay, we have one question. Do I have to?
Thanks. So this is kind of a cross question for the first and second presentation, considering that they were both about learning in a certain way. So for the first project, I was wondering if there was any collaborative engagement with the IDN. And for the second part, for the second presentation, if there was anything related to genre in this student-created IDN. So if they could elaborate on both, that will be nice. Thanks.
So the first question is for the first presenter. Is Wolfgang here online?
Yes, I'm here. I just can't open. Yeah, now the video is there. But sorry, I didn't get the question because I was working on getting the microphone and the video open.
So can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, kind of connecting to the second presentation. Oh, you're fading. But I was wondering if there was anything related to collaboration in this security thing, like some sort of, working together in this learning security module, and the kind of going into the second presentation, it was about genre, but collaboration.
Well, yes, we are working on a project together with communication scientists and our IT security department, and therefore we bring together all these three disciplines: the storytelling part, the IT security part, and the social sciences part and communication sciences part in this project, where we are working with the vulnerable groups to teach IT security.
So I believe now the second presenter, you can go ahead and reply to the second question.
If possible, to repeat it, because I had the same problem with the camera and I didn't listen to it.
Yeah, yes. I was wondering about genre in the work that you presented, if it had any impact on the student IDN, on the created part.
We did not impose any genre on them. They were allowed to freely decide on how to approach it. So in this case, we got a very diverse outcome.
All right, thank you for the answers. We still have time for one more question. Vincenzo.
Thank you. I have a question for the third presentation. I would like to ask Anca Șerbanescu if they already applied the model to some actual case of IDN. If can you give us some insights?
Hello, Vincenzo. Thank you for asking this question. Not yet in the real-life setting of a classroom, of a co-design setting, but is what I'm looking forward to do. That's also one of the limitations of this research paper. But yeah, that will be the next step.
All right. So thank you very much for the presenters and for the effort of being online. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, of course, you are welcome to stay, or I understand it's late over there. Thank you. So now we're going to have the second block. And I will call the first presenter, and as the first presenter is moving towards the stage, I will let you know who are going to be the next three, so you get ready. So the next presentation we have is titled Data Storytelling and Communication Students, the case of a course on computational thinking for communications. And by Joseph Livingstone Crawford and colleagues. And after Joseph, we're going to have fostering empathy through inclusive, interactive digital narratives. And then El Centro, the Downtown, a collaborative transmedia project among Ibero-American universities. And the last one for this block is going to be, what if we educated the students assuming they can think, a plan for critical education and interactive narratives, games, and related fields. And then we'll have the questions. So Joseph, you can go ahead. Do you, okay, you can, yeah.
Okay, 5 minutes. Good afternoon. Jesus. So next. I know the title is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to try to be very narrow and specific. The story behind this is that we work in a communications faculty that has 4 different careers in advertisement, in audiovisual communication, journalism, and social development communication. So we created a course called Computational Thinking for Communicators, because we realized that several skills like programming and including data storytelling was crucial for these aspiring communicators. So we worked with, in this preliminary work, with 50 students. We made a systematization of experiences, and we interviewed each one of them. We had like 100 students, but we couldn't interview them all. And what we realized is from the literature that data storytelling is like trying to break the preconceived notions that the audiences have with data. So when you get really insightful data, you can partially change the expectations that the audiences have. So we created a model to teach data storytelling, and the course, it's a 16-week course with 2 hours of practice with programming and 1 hour of theory. We teach them online and offline. We teach them Python using either Google Colab, Jupyter Notebook, and Visual Studio Code. And the objective, the final assignment, is to create an interactive dashboard that tells, that can tell a compelling story. They can be, we have no limitation on genre, seeing as we have students from different backgrounds. So the idea is that we also included, well, in the course, in the syllabus, the tools like for data crawling, how to use Python libraries such as Pandas, NumPy, Folium, and Matplotlib and Plotly Express, so that they could create interactive maps. Next. Oh, wait, go back. Sorry. The idea is that they first have to learn the variables, the basics of programming. Then we teach them to collect data. For example, we found an open repository from the Peruvian government. We also taught them how to crawl data from websites. For example, the audiovisual students used IBM or used Rotten Tomatoes to make databases. And then we teach them how to find relationships within data. And the idea is that by finding these relationships, we can teach them to create a narrative using surprising insights to subvert the expectation from the public. And then we build a story with data, and then finally we develop the dashboard to interact with the audiences. Okay, next. For now, the results, it's been really hard. I mean, they are communication students. They chose this career to avoid mathematics entirely. So it's been a challenge, really. Especially, they also struggle. This is from one of my previous works. We tried to measure the digital competences of students, and surprisingly, in this new digital generation, they are really lacking. For example, we tried to teach them to install the Jupyter Notebook environment, and they struggle with it, and some basic tasks such as switching between online and offline code. However, what we realized is that students, after the first 5 weeks, they really got the hang of it and created interesting projects. Next. Yeah. Students find it easier to explain their processes, not by creating graphics, which was strange to me, but by explaining the process in text. And although programming is considered to be an individual skill, they actually collaborated to create the code. Next. And for now, this is the first step. We realize that this skill actually helps them in other subjects such as journalism, research, and public communications because it fosters their analytical skills. And we're continuing with the next year with, like, for now it's predicted to be like 200 new students, but we'll do a survey because it's too much data to analyze. Thank you very much.
Now I will call Victoria Lagrange. And in the meantime, I have to say that this work is very interesting, and for me it's quite the opposite. I teach communication to computer science students, so I know what you're talking about, but from the other side.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm gonna stop my... Oh, no, that would be great. Thank you. So hi everyone. I'm gonna talk about fostering empathy through inclusive, interactive digital narratives. And yeah. So we all know that interactive digital narratives are very good for representing complex issues, right? And so that gives us a strong potential for representing inclusivity in interactive narratives. So far, there has been uncertain results in pro-social IDNs. So some of them have shown that interactivity is linked to pro-social behavior, while others have shown that there are literally no differences between the interactive and linear conditions. Our approach is trying to foster empathy for complex characters. So I'm going to explain a little later what that means. One of the things that we have to think about when we think about empathy are the various definitions of empathy. So you have perspective taking, which is imagining another person's point of view, which is very common in narratives. But empathic concern is really feeling, caring for the well-being of another person. And while perspective taking can motivate pro-social behavior, it also needs to increase empathic concern. So what we're trying to show is that we can create an inclusive IDN by associating perspective taking and empathic concern for a discriminated protagonist. The main question is, can video game narratives leverage empathy for people who are discriminated against and influence social attitudes? We have two main hypotheses. The game will be successful at fostering empathy for the immigrant protagonist. And the second one is these empathy gains will persist over time, leading to positive attitude change. So we created this game with my lab, the Game Narrative Lab at Kennesaw State University. It's a game that's entirely student-created. And so we added several layers to it to create a complex character. So we thought about character design and backstory. We have 3 complex characters who have ambiguous relationships to diversity and inclusion. So the main character is an immigrant who herself has to somewhat discriminate because she works in HR. The second aspect that we worked on is the world building. We used a generic setting to encourage a transfer of empathy and attitude, which is also why the game is called Corporation Incorporated. And then finally, we are highlighting realistic representations. So we have 2 types of mechanics, and we have used census statistics for the representation of people, so census statistics of the US. And players get real-time emotional feedback. So we're planning on doing 2 studies. Study 1 is the evaluation of empathy induction through gameplay. And so we are trying to assess first whether our game successfully fosters empathy for the protagonist. And so to do that, we're going to measure state empathy before through a pre-play questionnaire. They're going to play the game, and then we're going to remeasure state empathy while asking questions about gameplay. Okay, in study 2, we would like, so if we see that the game actually fosters empathy, we want to examine long-term empathy and behavioral change. And so for that, we're going to have a control group and a play group. In the play group, people are going to play the game, and then both groups are going to read immigrant stories, and then we're going to measure their empathy for those immigrants. And so the idea is that there will be a 1-week time span between the moment where the first group plays the game and then they read the stories. So those are the goals of our studies. They would give us insights into how IDN might be used in educational settings. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So, hello to everyone. My name is Alejandro Angel. I'm probably son of this Caribbean coast city called Barranquilla, so it's going to be so hard to me to try to talk just for 5 minutes, but I'm going to make it try. My name is Alejandro Angel, and as I said, and I'm here to show what we have been working the last year in this project called the Downtown, El Centro. The Downtown, a collaborative transmedia project among Ibero-American University. We have been working the last year with Autónoma University of Barcelona, UIDE in Quito, Pan American University in Mexico City, and UTADEO in Bogotá. This work in progress is presented by Liliana Ferrer from Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona and myself, Alejandro Angel. And we have been working trying to understand what's the downtown. For me, the downtown is a magical place. I've been working the last 10 years trying to capture the soul of the cities with my students, trying to find images like those ones that I'm going to be so fast with them. But this kind of image show the center, the downtown is a magical place because it's where everything began. Normally our cities get constructed through the downtown, so for us it's very important. What's the project? We have been working with these 5 universities trying to produce a transmedia project where 121 students and 5 teachers of these universities are trying to construct a transmedia project that is talking about the downtown with multi-format content. Those are the specific objectives. I'm going to go faster because we are working in transmedia storytelling. I know that the whole people in this space know the concept transmedia storytelling. If you haven't seen this infographic of Robert Pratten, I know that you have seen several times. If you don't have, Pratten is going to be so mad with you. But we are working on transmedia. The methodology of the project was we create a kind of a framework give to the students in several universities, and we create multicultural groups where 10 groups with people in each city working together. Then they start to work together among 2 months and start to produce content, and at the end we make some kind of exposition online and offline of the content. What content we ask for the students? We ask for them to try to making of the content. 3 formats. We put this amount trying to receive several kind of formats, and then we are going to see what they do. And write a dossier where they can put the knowledge that they acquire with this experiment. At this moment, we have made the pilot. The first pilot that we made, we have received 69 content. Most of them were curious. If we can think the people of these programs were journalists and filmmakers. So we have short documentaries, 6 of them, photographic, so many of them, but 4 kind of formats in photography and audiovisual and journalist content. The rest was journalists, magazines, books, interactive maps, and other contents. Yep. Those are some of the categories that we can find that the students try to work more. They work about night workers, legends, street music. There are several content of street performers. Those are kind of image of the content that they make. At the end, we have made an offline content. We have an Instagram account that we have been working the last years. We are going to use to show the results. And we have made some exposition of the content in the several universities. For example, this was the exposition in Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona. And those are the images in the exposition in Universidad Panamericana. We have understand several things with this first pilot. We have to try to generate another kind of work through the universities because it was so difficult to try to put the students to generate communication skills. So we are going to work in that. And we are going to try to put in the next year, 2025, the web online. So those are, and that's it. So that's it. It's difficult. 5 minutes.
Okay, it was a fascinating session, at least for me. Very interesting presentations. Now it's time for questions. We have one more? Oh yeah, sorry. Yes, sorry. Hartmut and Miriam. Yes. What if we educated students assuming they can think? A plan for critical education, interactive narratives, games, and related fields.
All right, thank you so much. Ooh, this is loud. Do I use this here or?
Yeah, you can use it. Yeah.
Okay. Which, just this button? Okay. All right. Good. So yeah, this is sort of, I mean, it's an early, idea. It's an early position paper. It's sort of, early research, but that's what late breaking work is for. So, I mean, Miriam and I had many discussions over the years in terms of education, what we feel is, there's room for improvement, basically, right? And what we feel is that there's a general lack of critical perspectives. What we mean by that is where we perceive a gap in many educational programs. We feel that we are quite good in giving students the what, established knowledge that applies to the topic at hand and related phenomena, and the how, right? So that we talk about method. Knowledge can be applied for analysis, and methods can be applied. But what is often missing is a why, a justification for the existence of that education material as well as an explanation of the real benefits. We basically tell students, oh, use this or that, but we don't tell them why and why this is good and what are the benefits of that. And we think what's also missing is sort of a general understanding of the limits of knowledge production. Right? I mean, we as professors, as elder scholars, we were probably quite aware of the limitations of many methods, and that's sort of also an inherent feature in a sense of knowledge production, but many times our students are not at all, and that's a problem. And of course, last but not least, what's also missing in the context of education material often is to create an awareness of the limitations in terms of bias and intersectional regimes of oppression that are inherent in many, of the existing findings. So the problem, in a sense, is a limited ability to critically assess existing knowledge, a reduced capacity for creativity in applying or innovating methodology. So students think, oh, this is the method, and I have to do it, and I cannot change anything. And there's, we're lacking, their creative abilities, basically. And in that sense, we're also not preparing students for interdisciplinary and research-based challenges. So in the sense, this is kind of our central claim. Students' education can be improved by increasing awareness of the reasons for the existence of established education material and the advantages that come with them. At the same time, students' critical understanding and perspectives would benefit from an increased focus on learning about the limitations of existing knowledge. So what we have basically right now in education is what we understand as a transactional model. We teach existing knowledge, we test the understanding, we repeat if necessary. All right? But the challenge here is there's an overemphasis on standardization, there's little room for knowledge creation by students, and students struggle with contextualizing knowledge or addressing its limitations, for example, in bias or when it comes to replication studies. And this is where we want to start, and that's what we sort of introducing here, the critical education framework. And here you see sort of a depiction of what we want to do. So our vision is to equip students with skills to think critically, innovate, understand the context and limitations of their field. And we really, our goals is understanding these origins and biases of theories and methods, develop the ability to be able to critique and choose appropriate tools for research by themselves and foster the creation of novel approaches when existing frameworks fall short. And basically what we want to use is group-based learning, research integration, and critical discussions. And the intended outcome is to make students critical thinkers, prepare them better for interdisciplinary challenges, and shift basically from passive knowledge transfer to active knowledge creation, and create a new generation of innovators in interactive narrative games and related fields. And that's basically our conclusion, call to action, to propose a transformative approach to education, emphasize critical thinking, creativity, and meaningful research integration. And yeah, join us in this effort, and maybe next year we will have a much longer paper about that, or some of you collaborating with us on developing this vision further. That's would make us very happy. Thank you so much.
Perfect timing, Hartmut. Thank you very much. So now it's for real. Now it's time for questions. This session is over. So any first questions here for these presenters? If no one raised their hand, I will ask a question to Joseph about your work. I'm particularly interested because I go through the struggles of teaching communication to computer science students, and I see a great resistance. So when you, of course, everybody laughed when you talked about how students, communication students, they choose communication because they are avoiding math. It's the same for computer science students. They choose, of course, it's a stereotype because they don't want to go any type of communication, public speaking, interpersonal communication. But of course, this is changing, right? So I have a great sample. I have more than 300 students, and I see how they appreciate. There is a resistance in the beginning, but then they understand the relevance. So I'm curious to hear from you what type of resistance do you see in your students to learn Python, for example, and how do you overcome them? In the meantime, if you have questions, please.
Yeah, I think what Dr. Kunitz just said is really important. I mean, the students, they told me two important things. Was at first they said, data has no story to tell. Why are we learning to use data? And then they saw a disconnect between theory and practice. I mean, they wanted more practice in theoretical hours. And we really struggled with making them understand that what's important is not the programming skills, but how to understand the processes so that they can then adapt them to anything they want to do. And we realized that the communication majors in Latin America have a bad rep, because it's like the career you choose when you don't know what to study. That and what's called administration, like business, is a general term in Latin America. So many of these students do not really know what they want in life. And that's, yeah. And they just enter any career because they think it's easy, or maybe they'll figure it out on the way. And when you confront them about it, I mean, for example, we had four different careers. I mean, you're studying audiovisual communication. What do you want to do? Make something, I don't know, teacher. Make something about your career, anything. And they really struggle to bring a creative element to their own, because they lack the knowledge. So I think that the initial reaction was overcome when, for example, we had to, we resisted at the beginning, but we had to use ChatGPT, for example, to help them use code, to create code. But the question was not, ChatGPT, create the code for me, but how can I create a code, and why did you create the code this way? So that they can compare the way they try to create their dashboards and how ChatGPT will have done it. And then they averaged that and made a better presentation. That's one of the, for now, it's
Okay.
one of the things I realized.
All right, yeah, we can talk more later. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Anyone in the room? Is there anybody online? No, okay, thank you. So no more questions. Okay, everybody wants to move on, so let's do it. So now we're going to start the last session. So I'm going to tell you the order, so you're ready. We're going to start with Being Water, Rafaela from Portugal, collaborating with an LLM, large language models in an interactive digital narrative as speculative aesthetics. So Rafaela, you can come over, please. And then after Rafaela, we're going to have design of knowledge graphs for interactive digital narratives, authoring, and then interactive digital narratives for modern historical research, and the last one, navigating audio-based interactive digital narratives focused on sound and affect.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hello. It really is powerful to have a microphone, like Lisa said. So my name is Rafaela Nunes, and I'm very glad to be in this wonderful country, Colombia. And I was brought from Portugal through the Atlantic streams, las corrientes. And indeed, I'm from Lisbon, and indeed, Lisbon and Barranquilla have some similarities in their connection with water. Water is a very strong element in the way that we define ourselves, at least that's my view. And the historical, cultural, philosophical presence of water in our cultural identities. And what I think is that in most areas of knowledge is that water is studied as a resource, as something to be used. And even when the approach, the angle is to see it in a more efficient way to use, so an ecological angle, the end point is always to use how to use water. And in our work, Being Water, which is also part of the art exhibition that you might see later on, we try to reframe this by speculating how water is, how it is to be water, through a collaboratively created IDN with me, Teri Martila, Andreas Isasa Giraldo, Paulo Bala, and Pedro Campos. And in this late-breaking work that I'm going to present, we have added a further element to this collaboration, an AI, through an LLM. So our work began as a digital environment created through our varied but quite complementary areas of knowledge. I am a Portuguese artist, transmedia artist, and I work with painting and programming. Then we have Teri Martila, which is a Finnish artist, and she works with spoken and written words. We have Andreas Isasa Giraldo, a Colombian artist and filmmaker, and finally Paulo Bala, which is a software engineering researcher. It's okay. So 4 human creators decided to bring in a 5th creator, collaborator, an AI. And after all, these were our human speculations about being water. But through an LLM, which is short for large language model, we aim to get an ever-changing stream of thoughts of what water could be, what it is to be water. So we prompted it with texts and visuals that we already had in our first iteration of our IDN. And what is an LLM? It is an aggregation of millions of different perspectives, of different thoughts, of different things that people have written around the internet. So it does not have a singular individual perspective like a human does. It's an aggregation of all of these views. So it kind of, when you prompt it, it kind of evens out all of these very different contrasting perspectives based on the probability patterns of its data set. A kind of view from nowhere, like Donna Haraway advises us, the dangers of a neutral view. Oh, okay, thank you. In Being Water, you find yourself immersed in a 360-degree video, which is from Andreas. Then you have these water beings that were created from my paintings through the collaboration with AI. And then you will hear the voices, the thoughts of these water beings, if you then look at our artwork later. And Paul Bala used Unity to create this whole environment, digital environment. And here, so we had a second iteration, which is our late-breaking work, in which we exchanged Terry's voices, so she's voicing these water beings, with the LLM. We tested a lot of different prompts, and it was quite difficult to get one that was really, wasn't cliche or whatever. So, like spouting very rhyming stuff. But in the end, we decided to use an authorial text of ours with the user view and context view so that the AI could have the most context possible in our work. And now finally, thank you, yes, you can put, we are going to see just a little bit of an excerpt of our video. And yeah, you just have to click. No? Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, but yeah, we have a code on the end. So yeah, on the left you have the full video, and on the right it's the demo that you are going to see on the art exhibition. So thank you very much, everyone.
Now we're going to have the work of Abhilash and Frank. The title is Design of Knowledge Graphs for Interactive Digital Narratives Authoring. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much. If you want, I can have a shot. That's okay. This one, right? Okay. Thank you. So we have the hard task of keeping everybody attentive in the last part of the presentation, so I'll try my best. So Abhilash, so our work is primarily based on design of knowledge graphs for ID and authoring, and it is based on the work done by Frank on the open source sandbox for ID and authoring, and it comprises of different parts, and this is one of the three projects we did as part of this exercise. So the first one was related to ID and authoring. That's not what we'll talk about today. The second one was creative tools for content, which is integration of artificial intelligence into the authoring environment. And the third one, which is what we'll be talking about today, is usage of knowledge graph to be the memory of the authoring system. And the two key objectives which we picked as part of this late-breaking work is, first is to define an ontology, which acts as a semantic layer to provide information. And the second one is related to the technology angle of which technology to pick from a graph database point of view to support an ID and authoring environment like this. So we did an implementation. I'll not go by the details, but the reason for picking such a diverse set of graph technologies is one is based on pure RDF triples, the other one is based on property model graph, both of which are open source environments. And we have a set of evaluation criteria on performance, scalability, flexibility, as well as the versioning mechanism, which is also an important element in the authoring system. So the graph shows all sorts of information about which performs better on what angle, et cetera, but in summary, we saw that the property model graph utilized by Neo4j performs better in terms of supporting the knowledge structures within the authoring environment. And versioning, this is the important element into our overall paper, which talks about, so the existing tools primarily provides a unique mechanism of doing ID and authoring. Whereas with the implementation of knowledge graph, we also talk about that authors can collaborate and co-create different versions of the same narrative space over a period of time. And it can also be used for broader analysis as well as identification of authoring patterns across different authors. And for this, we used an ontology defined based on Chapman's model because we picked interactive fiction as our case. In conclusion, Neo4j performed better because of the property model graph. Versioning and flexibility capabilities can also be introduced. And we also talked about versioning metadata as well as how the versions are maintained, how the user memory can also be maintained, not just from an author's point of view, as well as from the interactor's point of view. And future work, because if I go back to this picture, so we primarily focused on knowledge structures, whereas the implementation of knowledge graph can also be extended broader than just knowledge structures towards all the different components into the ID and authoring system. That's it. I hope I'm in time.
Thank you. I'll invite the next presenter, who is right here. No, it's right. You can use this one.
Okay.
I can use this as a remote control? Yes. That's the point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, this late-breaking work is about an ongoing project we just started 1 year ago, more or less, and there's a collaboration with the Historical Studies Department. You know that there is a public use of history that is invasive. Everyone of us has played some video game about historical facts. And there have been many applications. What we do, usually there are some concerns about the historical accuracy of what we is doing. In general, if you look at historiography, you see that historical research, which is the application we are doing, and actually I share the same concerns of people reporting work with students. Historians are more terrible than students usually to deal with. And they go from a positivist scientist in which there is history as an exact science. So there is an historical truth, to logocentrism, in which history is just a narrative. And we neglect truth in general. There has been also a synthesis by Topolsky in the 70s saying there are historical facts, but there are categories of writing, and then there is a formal relation between truth and writing in some sense. So what we did to use IDN by trying to make some network of historical versions, and in principle, there are many applications of this in the web. What we did was to try to enforce the creation, the collaboration on some digital writing by building narrative chunks that can collaborate each other into an IDN and to transfer the historical truth to structured writing. We try to make some interdisciplinary, because what I discovered recently is that history is split into disciplines, and the historians of economy don't talk with historians of the art, and sometimes there are very interesting interrelationships between each other. So we believe that IDN, we use some knowledge layer as a semantic truth that is the accepted facts, and then we build a narrative layer with several narratives that are interconnected with each other, and they are connected with the sources. So, we can rely on sources for that. And the whole thing is coordinated between several historians that write this network. Actually, there is an interface that relies on a map where all the narratives are posited, and they are interconnected through concepts that are in the historical truth representation. So all these are connected together. There is a website. Unfortunately, it is in Italian because it's an Italian project connected to the local areas in order to involve the local communities who want to contribute with the spatial projects that relate the communities. So if you want to create something that
interconnects history of the art with tourism and trying to understand the historical facts about some area, you can engage them inside this. This will be the second phase of the project, the one with a larger development of the narratives. So this is just an example that puts together some cycle of painting frescoes in churches with the commerce of sheep in some area, and together with the historical truth representation. This is interesting because they discovered, for example, that the history of a painter that was penetrating an area of the territory was given commissioning by the brotherhood of breeders of that place that were going through that road for transhumance of sheep. So you can see there are many animals in the frescoes because of the commissioning. So they could put together the history of the art and the penetration of this artist with the history of transhumance and the commercial facts in that area. So we have a knowledge graph, as what was in the previous presentation, with as an historical truth, so the basic facts connected with the narratives and connected with the sources. These are original documents and the digital versions of the frescoes. And we made some experiments with the prototype, 9 participants. We had a lot of training of historians on the exemplar cases. So because I had to train them how to use this interactive digital narrative because they used to this logo narrative. And then this is the interdisciplinary part that has been very interesting to put interconnection between them. We are going to develop this knowledge graph of this and try to verify the connection with the narratives and the historical truth through some formal reasoning. Thanks for your attention.
Mamma mia. Okay, I will invite the last presenter, least but not least, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is that, now I can, hopefully I'm technically proficient enough to point. Okay, yes, so last but not least, I hope, as they say, I will point out I am the only late-breaking work presenter who matched my outfit to my slides, so take that, Vincenzo. You thought you had a moment. Okay, so I am Lisa Holloway-Attaway. I'm here on behalf of my co-author, colleague, collaborator, sometimes friend when he just does what I tell him to do, Jamie Faucus, who can't be here. We're both at the University of Skövde in Sweden in a department of game development. He works in sound, hence our title. I work in other forms of arts, humanities-based critical perspectives on making interactive digital media, from storytelling to theater. The work that we show today is really our attempt to figure out how to work together in an interdisciplinary capacity while not being dangerous to each other at the same time as we learn about the different fields. So I can learn about things like what binaural sound is and does, and ambisonic sound, and he can figure out what I mean by a deconstructed narrative and why toxic masculinity is bad and he should stop doing it. So that's how we begin. I'm sorry, I'm tired, it's a long day. So we are gonna talk about the critical framework we're in the very early stages of developing for the design and critique of audio-based interactive narrative experiences. We'll share just a small snippet of the work we're doing. But our aim is really to foreground how deep material connections to sound and affect, which we'll explain briefly, as well as to the rhetorical and narrative properties of story voice as a vehicle for storytelling. So that's a lot to unpack in the remaining 3 minutes. But our objective for the framework is to aid in both the design and the critique of audio-based artifacts, focused on embodied user experience, where affect is a way to really explore innovative material storytelling techniques and concept of deep listening with sound, which again is very embodied. So again, our theoretical foundations are pretty intense, and I can't unpack them, but they are grounded in critical posthumanism and feminist new materialism. Ideas of moving among and across material bodies, transcorporality, transmutation, and interactability, bodies that shift and change and deeply interact and resonate with objects in both the material and digital world, multiple kinds of distributed agencies. So our work is a lot about power and how to deconstruct power as a form of kind of political resistance, but also as a way to deconstruct the notion of what it means to be human and non-human. So the three works that we apply, our framework that we're presenting here today, are three different works of some that we've created. I can't go into detail, but one is called Transmissions, Resonant Encounters. It's a sound walk that's meant to be experienced with headphones while walking through an urban space. And it sort of performs the notion of an academic lecture, but while deconstructing and talking about a lot of the theoretical foundations we want to introduce and undo. It's a personal experience. The other is one we created as an immersive web-based audio-only experience that was created in Unity and is intended to be a single person exploring the isolation of the pandemic through fragmentation and so on. Again, lots of techniques. We created it during the pandemic, and then it was actually exhibited at ICIDS in 2020 in the art exhibition. And this is Jamie's work with some of our former students that was an installation performance piece based on vocalization of the human scream triggered as you walk through a performance space. So our critical criteria, as I said, really at this point, we've really only developed the criteria in our testing. It was hard enough to figure out how do you measure affect. Through exploring how we created the work, we came up with these 4 categories that come a way for us to intervene in the pieces and discuss them and others. So temporality, you can't have sound without temporality. It doesn't exist unless there's time, but also transhistorical narrative perspectives, mediation, which is the apparatus by which a work, both the technical and the sociocultural background, interaction, where does the interaction happen, in what kind of narrative space or technical space, and then this issue of embodiment. And so what we did in this early work is we tried to apply them and found out we're not looking for clear rules, we're looking for sliding scales and for descriptive elements that we can use. We need a lot more future work to try to figure out a method by which we can actually test this with users. We have our own ideas. As we heard today, it's very difficult to do. It's very inspired by the first talk, actually talking about methods and how we can move through that to figure out, we know what we were doing as designers, but to figure out how the users reflect and how we can categorize and classify that. So we're putting the late breaking into late breaking work because we're very early to that. So if you'd like more, you can contact me. Don't talk to Jamie, only to me.
Okay, we don't have much time for questions. Thank you, all the presenters. And is there anyone, okay, one over there, Brianne. Is there anybody else who'd like to ask a question after Brianne? Okay. Okay, so 2 questions for now. Yeah, Brianne.
Okay, cool. Great presentations, guys. But my question specifically, well, first, Lisa, your outfit's great. Love it. But my second question is for Rafaela. Rafaela, I absolutely love what you do. I thought that was so cool. And I wanted to just quickly reflect. I was just recently attending an event in Geneva where there was a session that was presented on positive tipping points in climate. And basically, you know, they talked about how we're facing all these climate crises, but you know, the narratives that are being told are all risk-based narratives that are very, you know, scare tactics and things like that. And although the panel included members like from the United Nations and the Global Systems Institute at Exeter and stuff, the key highlight for me was a gentleman by the name of Mindahi Munoz, who is the global coordinator of the Earth Elders. And he said that the earth is not a resource, and we need to stop thinking of it that way, and that we need to live with the earth, not in the earth. And that requires us to basically embed into learning a different method of teaching, which is the teaching of beautiful thinking. So your project was so cool to me because it just made me reflect on that whole session, and I'll send it to you at some point too so that you can see it, but it's really cool.
Thank you very much. Oh, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe further there.
Yeah, I'm going to put myself in the middle again. Thank you very much for your question. I think it's wonderful. And yes, indeed, there's been a lot of scare tactics in ecological thought. There's something called environmental anxiety, ecological anxiety that young people have been developing a lot. This speculative turn that we're doing, and we're actually basing ourselves a lot in post-human feminist theory, which Lisa very beautifully was referring there. And they basically, these new materialisms, they deconstruct these binaries like nature, culture, human, non-human, active, passive, subject, object, and so on. So I think that through art, at least, perhaps not actually, I mean, I'm an artist, I don't know, I just give people problems and questions so that they can solve them themselves. That's what we do. Yeah, so our objective is to make people think like through these binaries in a more gradient or hybrid ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is actually for Lisa. Hey, I'm Rex, thanks to you. I know you're trying to come up with a model. Are you thinking in terms of when you say medium and body? Are you thinking in the scales you're going to create are based on what the sound actually does to a medium? For example, that's called what we used to call it in Spanish reduced hearing. You have to describe the sound by its elements. Temporality makes a lot of sense, but it's temporality, for example, in the way that the speed that the material vibrates, or is it temporality in the sense that how long is the audio clip, for example? So when trying to mediate it, are you trying to mediate it from the perspective of the listener, or are you trying to mediate the sound in the absence of the listener?
What a great question. I wish Jamie were here to answer it. No, but it's true. But we talk a lot about the notion of temporality. Again, I think he's teaching me a kind of a lot. We're doing both, but we're really interested in the interaction between the user's body and the designer's body. But the sound is the function of doing that. So sort of on all levels. That's the problem we have with this idea of temporality. We don't want to look at it as, you know, again, beginning and end, or the ways that it's broken up in some way. We're also trying to look at it in the way that it feels or is experienced or is controlled by a user's body as one way to understand how it works. So the answer is we're doing everything and trying to figure out how to actually complexify that so that we don't think of it as being a kind of a simple act. So I don't. That's what I would say about that in that respect.
Okay, thank you. We actually have one last question on Zoom. So I will ask the person who is online to just go ahead and ask the question. No? There is no more question. Okay, all right. So thank you very much. I think this was a great session. Okay, my microphone was off for a few seconds. Okay, so let's give a round of applause to other presenters. And two things, perhaps you didn't have a chance to ask a question or to receive a question, so I encourage you to keep talking to each other over the next days. And I also want to remind you that the posters are hanging out doors outside in the coffee break area. So I encourage you to have a look at them and talk to the authors. Now I'm going to pass the word to Maria.
Hello, well, thank you for resisting such a rich and long first day, well, second day of conference. Now we're gonna move to the art exhibition. There, our creative chair, Gabriela, will also present the work and give us some instructions to access the museum. And that's it. Please pick everything that you brought with you. And thank you, everybody, to our keynotes, to our staff, our streaming. Thank you, everybody. All the authors. And see you. The museum is just right in the first floor outside this building.